So, my dears, today we are going to talk about two important things. The first one is frequency adverbs, and the other one is can or can't, okay? Yesterday we were solving some activities, and in the previous classes, we solved some activities related to can or can't. You know that this is to talk about possibilities, things that you are able to do, okay? Like I can dance, I can draw, or when you talk of can't, is when you are talking about impossibilities. Today we are going to check a bit more about it, but we are going to be also talking about this frequency adverbs. Have you ever heard something about it? Or do you remember something about frequency adverbs? We talk a bit about this when we talk about present simple. But I want to know if you remember something of this, something of frequency adverbs. Do you have any idea, any clue? What is this? What frequency adverbs can be? And if you don't have idea, what do you imagine if I say this word, frequency adverbs? Think about it and let me know, please. Any clue? For example, Juan Pablo, do you have any clue about this? What do you imagine if I say frequency adverbs? What could this be?
Verbos de frecuencia, pero pues no sé.
Adverbios de frecuencia, okay. And how can we use it? Okay, tell me, baby. Tell me, Majo.
As I remember, the frequency words are like how often an action happens or how often we do an action.
That's it. So, you use frequency adverbs, my dears, mainly when you want to express or to show the frequency of an action or the frequency of something. How often you do something, okay? So we are going to check this and we are going to read it. As I was telling you, we use adverbs of frequency to say how often we do things or how often things happen, as I was telling you. I am going to show you guys a box of frequency adverbs with some percentages of these. So I need you to take notes. I need you to let me know if you have questions. If you don't have idea of what is the meaning of this, please let me know. So let's see. Today we are going to be working with some of the most common frequency adverbs. So on the first place we have always. What is the meaning of always, guys?
Siempre.
Siempre. Very good. So, siempre, that means this is 100% of frequency. This is something that you always do, 100% of frequency. So, let's check the example. Pachito, can you please help me reading the first example?
Always. He always give flowers to Mary.
Okay, thank you. He always gives flowers to Mary. So here we have a person who knows that Mary loves flowers, so he always gives flowers to her. Nico, do you have questions?
Is the 18 5?
No, 100%. The first one, always.
Always.
Yes, always. Algo que siempre
Is
pasa.
flowers? Is you Mary? Le encanta. ¿Cómo lo voy a traducirlo? ¿Cómo le encantan las flores? Mary, le gustan las flores.
Sí, siempre le da flores a Mary porque a Mary le gustan las flores, pero el que estamos trabajando, mi amor, es always, siempre. Acuérdate mucho de esta palabra. Cuando tú utilizas always, estás diciendo siempre, ¿vale? Algo que siempre pasa. ¿Ok, Nico?
Okay.
Okay, let's continue now. Always 100% of frequency. Let's go with the next one. 85% of frequency. And the word is usually. Okay, Nico, can you please help me reading the example? Ayúdame a leer este ejemplo. I usually
take 2 buses per day.
Thank you. I usually take 2 buses per day. Let's imagine that, for example, this is a person who works, I don't know. Let's imagine that he lives at La Calera, but he works in Bogota. Okay? So, in order to arrive to the work, that person has to take the first bus here at La Calera in order to arrive to Bogota, and then he has to take a different bus in Bogota in order to arrive to his work. But what happened, for example, on weekends, on Sundays? On Sundays, he may be able or she may be able to stay at home, so it is not necessary to take any bus. For that reason, it is not something that happens all the time, it is not super common, it is not always, but it is something usual. Usually 85% of frequency, okay? Questions about always or usually, babies? Okay, let's go with the next one. The next one is 75% of frequency, and the word is frequently. What is the meaning of frequently, guys? Tell me, baby.
Frecuentemente.
So raise your hand, don't be mean. So yeah, frecuentemente. Natalia, can you please help me reading that example? She frequently.
Okay, Miss. She frequently goes to the park.
She frequently goes to the park. Very good. It is not something like every single day, but it is common. Yeah, frequently. Ella frecuentemente va al parque. How many times per week? We don't know, but we know that it's something that she likes to do, so it's something that she frequently do. Questions about it?
No, Miss.
Perfect. Now, there is another frequency adverb that is often. When we use often, babies, we are talking of a 60% of frequency. Do you know what is the meaning of often, babies?
A menudo.
A menudo, very good. Often, a menudo. Okay, Juandi, can you please help me reading that example? Juandi? Okay, maybe he's not here. What about Samu? Samu, can you please help me reading the example of often?
Yes, miss. Often. We often miss. Sorry. We often miss the English class.
Okay, we often miss the English class. Of course, this is not true in your case. Okay, but in some cases, guys, let's imagine, for example, those kind of weeks when we have like a lot of activities at school and we don't have the chance to have the class. Okay, so in that case, you are going to use often. When something it is, you have more possibilities to have the class than the possibilities that you have to miss the class. But it can happen a menudo. We often miss the English class. Questions about the use of often, babies? Okay. And now we arrive to sometimes. Sometimes it's like in the middle of the frequency adverbs, babies. Because sometimes is the word that shows a 50% of frequency. So half of the time you do something, half of the time you don't do it. Can you see? So sometimes is super important. You use sometimes a lot if you realize. And sometimes means, what is the meaning of sometimes?
Sometimes a veces.
A veces. Okay, so Juandi, now that you are there, can you please help me reading the example?
Yes, they sometimes play soccer until the night.
Thank you. So they sometimes play soccer until the night. Sometimes is when you want to express that you used to do something, but not every time, just half of the time. Okay? Sometimes is super used in English. Up to this point, the ones that we use the most, up to this point, las que más usamos en inglés hasta este momento are always, usually, sometimes. Those are super common. Questions about it, my dears? Please take notes, don't forget it. Okay, from now on, we are going to begin checking the frequency adverbs that express that we don't do something that much, okay? That the frequency is not like, it is not that common. So let's go with the next one. 40% of frequency. And that one is occasionally. What is the meaning of occasionally?
Ocasionalmente.
Ocasionalmente. So Daniel, can you please help me reading that example? I occasionally.
I occasionally travel by work.
Thank you. I occasionally travel by work. So, for example, if someday we have, I don't know, we have to visit a museum, but the museum is in Cartagena. So, occasionally, I have to travel to Cartagena to go with my students to the museum that we have there. So, it is not something that common, but it can happen occasionally. The next one, rarely. What is the meaning of rarely?
Casi nunca.
Casi nunca. Very good. Rarely. 30% of frequency, 30% of possibility. So, rarely. Majo Vélez, can you please help me reading that example, princess?
You rarely mix your friendship with business.
Okay, thank you. So, you rarely mix your friendship with business. It is not common that you have, for example, friends at work. It is not common that you have friends when you are doing or closing an important deal. So, casi nunca mezclas la amistad con los negocios. ¿Ok? It may happen, but it is super weird. Questions up to this point? Okay, so let's go with the next one. 20% of possibility, 20% of frequency. And the word is seldom. What is the meaning of seldom, my dears?
Raramente.
Raramente. Okay, so please, guys, don't get confused. Please don't be confused because I know that rarely can sound like raramente. Yo sé que rarely suena como raramente, but it's casi nunca. And seldom, it is raramente, okay? So we are going to check the example. Majo Garcia, can you please help me reading the example? He seldom.
He seldom lends something.
Thank you. He seldom lends something. Do you know what is the meaning of the word lends? What is that?
I don't know.
Who knows? For example, tell me, baby.
Prestar.
Prestar. Very good. He seldom lends something. Okay? Like, he rara vez presta algo. Es like super difícil que lo haga. So, seldom. And now we are going to check the two others that express like a few frequency. Okay? So, the next one is hardly ever. 10% of frequency. What is the meaning of hardly ever? What is that?
It's like a synonym of seldom actually, because it's like the same.
Yeah, but actually it is like more synonym of rarely. Okay, but in a less percentage. Hardly ever, casi nunca. Es como difícilmente esta persona hace algo. This hardly is going to give you a strong. Les va a dar fuerza ahí. So hardly ever. It's like super hard for this to happen. So we are going to check the example. Give me a moment. Sophie, can you please help me reading the example?
Yes, Miss. We hardly ever play video game.
So, we hardly ever play video games. It is not usual. I don't even have, I don't know, a machine to play video games. So, just 10% of the time. And finally, my dears, we have something that we use a lot and is never. Never is going to show you a 0% of frequency. That is something that it doesn't happen in your life. So, what is the meaning of never, babies?
Nunca.
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 So this is one frequency adverb that we use a lot, but it represents nunca. So we are going to check the example. Vero, can you please help me reading that example?
Yes, miss. I never go out without money.
Thank you. So I never go out without money. I never leave my home without money because something may happen, and if I don't have money, that can be a problem. Okay, so never. Questions of frequency adverbs, my dears, up to this point? Do you have any question about it? So, the most common in English, you use all of these, but we usually use some others more. So, we have you always, we have usually, sometimes, and never. Those are the ones that we use the most. Esos son los que más usamos usualmente. So, if you don't have questions, we are going to continue. This is like the translation of the ones that we check, but here, guys, we have some others. Like, for example, every day. As you can see, every day, todos los días. I wake up every day at 7 a.m. This is, for example, when you are talking of daily routines. Lo pueden usar cuando estás hablando de daily routines. So, every day is something that you can use. Todos los días. Or you can say like every Thursday, every Friday, every Monday, todos los lunes, todos los martes. Yeah, every Wednesday I have a swimming practice. Todos los miércoles tengo práctica de natación. So that is a routine, that is something that happens all the time. But instead of saying always, you can use every day or every Thursday, Wednesday, whatever. You can also say on Thursdays, on Fridays, on Wednesdays. This is synonym. Estos dos son sinónimos, como cada jueves o los jueves. Can you see? For example, if you use once a month, look at this word. Once a. Una vez. So in this case, once a month, once a year, once a week, una vez al mes, una vez al año, una vez por semana, yo hago esto. Frequency adverbs. Twice a month, 3 times a month. So you just have to change like the number. Once a week, twice a week, and you are going to be able to express how often you do something. If you don't want to use the common frequency adverbs, you can use these ones. Questions about it, babies? Okay, I guess no. So let's continue, babies. There are, babies, three important rules for making sentences with frequency adverbs. Okay? So we are going to check it one by one. 3 rules for making sentences with frequency adverbs. Take notes, please. Rule number 1. We are going to read it together. Pachito, can you please help me reading this one?
Usually go before the verb. Frequency adverb plus verb.
Thank you. So there is something that you need to know. When you are using a frequency adverb, you are going to place that frequency adverb before the verb, antes del verbo principal. ¿Listo? No me lo vas a poner después, es antes del verbo usualmente, no siempre. Miren que acá no dice always, dice usually. So usually 85%, don't forget it. Usually go before the verb. So let's continue. Rule number 2. Sari, can you please help me reading this part?
Okay, miss. With the verb to be, adverbs of frequency usually go after this verb. To be, auxiliary, more frequency after.
Okay, thank you. So as I was telling you, babies, it usually goes before the main verb, but here we have the exception. With verb to be, adverbs of frequency usually go after the verb. Not before, but after. So you may have verb to be plus auxiliary plus frequency adverb. I am going to show you some examples, don't worry. And rule number 3. We are going to check this rule. Give me a moment. Natalia, can you please help me reading this part?
Yes, Miss. The words sometimes and usually can go to the beginning or end of sentence.
Thank you. And this is another exception, guys. You can use frequency adverbs before the verb, but in the case of sometimes and usually, that can go at the beginning of the sentence. So you can say sometimes I eat hamburgers, or you can say I sometimes eat hamburgers. You can say usually I go to church on Sundays. Or you can say, I usually go to church on Sundays. Can you see? Puedes poner usually and sometimes at the beginning or before the main verb. Puedes ponerlo al principio o antes del verbo principal. Questions up to this point, guys?
Por mi parte, no.
No?
Por mi parte.
Okay, great.
No.
What about the others? Super clear?
Yes, Miss.
So as you have it clear, let's try to make an example of this one together. What happened? How do you imagine an example with verb to be maybe? Because I told you, it usually goes after this verb. So I can say, I am bored sometimes. Can you give me another example? So think about it and you are going to give me a different example with verb to be at the end. Tell me.
Can we be how was it? I forgot it. I have it. It was like I don't remember if it was Aries, but I think it was. Can she? No, it wasn't. Wait, Miss, I forgot it.
Okay, so think about it. I know that you have it. Who wants to try? I know that you can do it, so go ahead. You can also say, for example, I am always late. Or you can say she is seldom late. Or we are never late. It can be at the end when you have usually or sometimes, don't forget it. But for example, if you have another one, let's try to make, I don't know, usually. Let's try to make one with usually. Tell me, baby.
One can be they are usually tired from classes.
Yeah, they are usually tired. So don't forget, guys, that you are going to use verbs to be first. This is important. Siempre tienen que usar el verbo to be antes de ponerme el adverbio de frecuencia. Okay, so that's important. Or usually it's important, okay? And the other ones, well, it's easy because we made a lot of examples. So let's continue. This is something important, babies, because we can also use frequency adverbs when we are going to make questions. And of course, if you have this kind of question, you should answer with a frequency adverb. Si tienen una pregunta de este estilo, lo ideal sería que contesten con un frequency adverb. So, for example, let's read it. Juan, can you please help me reading this slide, baby?
Yes. In case you want to ask questions, we use the words how often to know how often someone does some activity.
Thank you. Someone does an activity. So, guys, when you are making questions, when you want to know how often someone does something, you are going to use this word, how often. What is the meaning of how often, guys? What is that? What is how often? No one.
It wasn't like cuánto.
Yeah, como cada cuánto, qué tan
¿Con qué
seguido.
frecuencia?
Yeah, so cada cuánto, qué tan seguido. So, how often do you play Xbox? ¿Qué tan seguido juegas Xbox? ¿Cada cuánto juegas Xbox? ¿Qué tan seguido haces algo? Or how often do you read a book? And the answer would be with, or should be, with a frequency adverb. So if I say, Majo Vélez, how often do you read books? How would you answer that question?
Okay. I I usually read books, but mostly on Sundays.
So I usually read books. I am going to take that first part. So how often do you read books? She said, okay, I usually read books. Mostly on Mondays, but I usually do it. What happens if I say, Pachito, how often do you eat hamburgers?
I always eat Adverbs.
I always eat hamburgers, teacher. Of course, I eat hamburgers all the time. So
No,
can you
profe,
see?
sigue estando flaquito.
When I use, guys, how often, I should answer with a frequency adverb because in the question I am asking about the frequency that someone has to do something. So, for example, Daniel, how often do you sleep before 9 p.m.?
I never sleep for the 9 p.m.
Can you see? So, teacher, I never do it. I never go to
I
bed
never-
before that hour. So, frequency adverbs. Questions up to this point? Let's continue then. As you don't have questions of frequency adverbs, we are going to check some examples. Do you remember what is the first rule that I gave you? That frequency adverbs what? Rules to use frequency adverbs.
Yo creo que era poner de adverb, bueno, frecuencia antes del este.
I don't understand that. First of all, because it is in Spanish, and second, because el este, I don't know what is that. But maybe, Juan Andres may help you. Pachito, help him.
That usually the frequency adverb goes before the verb.
Very good. Usually, the frequency adverb goes before the main verb. So let's check some examples. The first one, I always eat cereal for breakfast. So can you see, yo siempre como cereal para desayunar. Subject, frequency adverb, verb. Okay? We have another one. She usually exercises on Mondays. Subject, frequency adverb, verb. What do you see here in this second example? ¿Qué ven en este segundo ejemplo importante del verbo principal? ¿Qué tiene qué? What happened with exercise? Can you see that we have this in present simple, guys? Because we are talking about routines, we are talking about something that is common, something that is usual. So in that case, as we have she, don't forget that you have to add es or es at the ending. No olviden, amores, las terminaciones es o s al final, dependiendo del verbo. El hecho de que pongas un frequency adverb no hace que tú quites esa terminación al final. La única forma para no ponerla es si tienes un auxiliar, que en el caso del presente simple, ¿cuáles son los auxiliares? Who can tell me the auxiliary verbs of present simple? We learned about it the previous week. Do or
Does.
does. That's it. But as we don't have do or does here, you don't have to change the ending. Aquí solo puse una S final. She usually exercises on Mondays. Or we have another one. They sometimes play here. Ellos algunas veces, en ocasiones, a veces, juegan aquí. But once again, we have subject, frequency adverb, and verb. Questions about the first rule? Questions about these examples, babies? Okay, let's go with rule number 2. Do you remember which was that rule? Rule number 2, who can tell me? Tell me, baby. Pachito, attack, tell me.
Yeah. Is that with the verb to be, the frequency adverbs usually go after this verb.
So, thank you. Usually, guys, with verb to be, the frequency adverb is going to be after verb to be. So, that means that you are going to have first the verb to be and then the frequency adverb. We are going to check some examples. The first one, she is always happy. Ella siempre está feliz o ella siempre es feliz. So, can you see subject? We have verb to be, and then we have the frequency adverb and the complement. What happened with the next one? It is sometimes boring. Eso es algunas veces aburrido. It is sometimes boring, but once again, you have subject, verb to be, and then the frequency adverb. Or you can say, you are never on time. Tú nunca estás a tiempo. Tú nunca llegas a tiempo. So, once again, subject, verb to be, and frequency adverb plus complement. Questions about the use of frequency adverbs with verb to be, guys? Perfect. And finally, number 3, rule number 3. Who can tell me? Someone different from Pachito because I know that you take notes. So, what's the rule number 3, Majo? Tell me.
The rule number 3 is the page. Well, yeah, yes. In case you want to ask questions, we use the words how often to know how often someone does some activity.
Okay, that's more like number 4. That's like, but that is important. Don't forget how often to make questions. But before how often, we said something of usually and sometimes. What did we say of usually and sometimes? Who can tell me? Rule number 3. Who took notes? ¿Quién tomó notas? What's rule number 3, guys?
How is the question?
Rule number 3. What's rule number 3? Did you remember that I told you 3 rules, almost 4, to use frequency adverbs? So I am asking what's number 3? Natalia, tell me.
Okay, the words sometimes and usually can go to the begin or end of sentence.
That's it, very good. The frequency adverbs usually and sometimes may go at the beginning or at the end of the sentence. I mean, you can have it like here, look at this, they sometimes play here, or you can say sometimes they play here. Puedes ponerla al principio, al final o en la mitad. Pero solo con usually and sometimes, solo con esas dos. So we are going to check the examples. Usually, I'm late. Or you can say, I am usually late. Or you can say, I'm late usually. Can you see? I can move this usually of position and the meaning of the sentence, the intention, is never going to change. Here we have another example. Sometimes I watch TV. I sometimes watch TV, or I watch TV sometimes. So it is exactly the same sentence, but sometimes is at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. And the intention and the meaning of this sentence is not different at all. Questions up to this point, babies? Okay, great. So we are going to continue because you don't have questions. Now that you know how to use frequency adverbs, now that we have checked a bit about it, we are going to review can and can't. So don't forget, can or can't is to talk about abilities. Habilidades, ¿listo? I know that you know how to use can or can't because you have been using this for a while, lo han estado utilizando. However, we are going to check it like super fast. We are going to read this slide. So, Samu, can you please help me reading this part?
Okay, Miss. Can is a modal verb. It be used to express ability or to state that something is possible. Be the same for all subjects. We do not add an s in the third person like other verbs.
Thank you, baby. So we have some things important here. The first one, can is a modal verb. Es un verbo modal. So this is to express how something is done. Un verbo modal para decir cómo se hace algo. Okay? It can be used to express ability or to say that something is possible. So as I was telling you, so if you say, look at this image, the first one, he can't swim, he can swim. No puede nadar, sí puede nadar. So to say something about abilities or possibilities. And it can be the same for all the subjects. I mean, it is going to be the same. This is not going to change because of the subject. No es que vayas a poner can y otro tipo de can si tienes he, she o it. Aquí no te cambia nunca. Siempre va a ser can. Y al poner un verbo modal, aunque estemos hablando en presente simple, aunque estemos hablando de un hecho que estemos diciendo, ella puede nadar, ¿se acuerdan que en presente simple decíamos que para facts, para hechos, para cosas que son así, utilizamos presente simple? Como en este caso estamos hablando de habilidades, de posibilidades, no le vamos a agregar la S a la tercera persona porque el can te lo reemplaza. So, instead of saying she can dance, no tienes que decir she can dances, ¿sí ves? No dices she can dances, sino solamente she can dance. ¿Por qué? Porque ya estás agregando un verbo modal que te está indicando cómo funciona la acción y que es algo que esa persona puede hacer aquí y va a poder hacer mañana y va a poder seguir haciendo. ¿Ok? Questions up to this point, guys? Okay, so we are going to check some rules to use can. So as usual, affirmative, negatives, and questions. Let's go with the first one. The positive formation. Juan Pablo, can you please help me reading this part? Juan Pablo?
Sí, profe, espérate que estaba bien, está bien.
Don't worry, don't worry.
Subject can.
So can you please help me reading for the positive?
Yeah. Okay, for the positive form, the formation is subject, more can, more verb. ¿Es more o...?
Plus. Plus.
Plus, okay.
So again, subject plus.
Okay, subject plus can plus verb.
Thank you. So, my dears, easy peasy. When you are saying something in affirmative, in positive, you just have to use subject plus the modal verb that is can plus verb. So, Tomás can sleep a lot of hours. Maria can travel around the world. My mom can cook delicious cookies. Can you see? Subject, can, plus verb. Questions about it? No. Let's continue. Let's go with the negative form. Vero, can you please help me reading this part?
Yes, miss. To form the negative, we add not. After can to form one word, cannot. We can also contract the negative to form can't. Can't, cannot.
Thank you. So for the negative form, my dears, you just have to add the word not. Okay? And this is the word cannot. So you can put it like apart, but it is usually together. The contracted form, it can be can't para las formas negativas. Entonces, si te das cuenta, no solo puedes usar can't, que es la que nosotros hemos conocido siempre. También puedes usar cannot. Y es exactamente lo mismo. So you can say, Maria can't travel around the world. Or you can say, Maria cannot travel around the world. Si vas a utilizarlo con not, miren cómo se escribe pegado. No es can espacio not, sino cannot. One word. If you are going to use can't, you just have to use can't. You know how to use can't. So you can say, my father can't visit Australia, or my father cannot visit Australia. It depends of the situation, okay? Questions about the negative form? Okay, and look at this part. When you are talking about questions or interrogative forms. So, look at this. Let me check. Pachito, can you please help me reading this part?
Yes. To from the question, we change the opposition of the subject and the auxiliary verb. The main verb is still in the infinitive without to.
Thank you. I made a mistake here. It is not to from, but to firm. I'm sorry. Cambié las letras. I'm sorry, my bad. But the important thing is that you know. So to form the questions, guys, we change the position of the subject and the auxiliary verb. So switch. Do you remember? Lo tienen que voltear. So the first thing that you are going to have is can and then the verb. So can you fly? Can you dance? Can she sleep? Can we visit our grandma? So the first thing is the auxiliary, the modal verb, can. Can't you read that book? Lo pueden usar primero el can y después todo lo demás. Verbo modal, luego el sujeto, luego el verbo y todo lo demás. Questions about it? Okay, my dears. So, as you don't have more questions, here we have some examples. So, I can speak English, you can ride a bike, he can drive a car, she can play the guitar, it can swim. And in negative, I can't speak French, you can't ride a horse, he can drive a truck, and so on. For questions, how can you make this a question? We can play football, or can we play football? Or this one, they can dance. Can they dance? So you just have to change it. They can speak Spanish. Can they speak Spanish? Okay, my dears, these are just some examples. And not have to. This one. Let's finish here. Questions about the use of frequency adverbs or can and can't? Okay, my dear, so as you don't have questions, we are going to stop here by now, and then in the next class we are going to have our practice.